Hey guys, FilthyRobot here, bringing you another guides, tips, and tricks video. This time we're asking the question of how good is Sumeria? So let's take a look at their bonuses and then talk a little bit about how this civilization interacts and how these bonuses play into determining the strength of the civilization. So 4 bonuses like everybody else. We have our unique ability here, which is we may declare war on anybody at war with my allies without warmonger penalties. Which is basically a single player only thing. I'm not entirely sure quite yet if war weariness is based on part on the type of warmonger penalty you're getting or just the type of war you're declaring. So if this turns out to be beneficial towards war weariness, this will be a little bit better in multiplayer. But in general, this is still a pretty good ability in single player. Not great, but okay. The second part of this is when at war with a common foe, they and their allies share pillage rewards and share combat experience gains within 5 tiles. This bonus is not properly worded relative to what it actually does right now. You don't have to be at war with a common foe to get this bonus. Basically, it looks like what this was, the parsing on this, what it's trying to say is when Sumeria is at war with a common foe with one of their allies gets the same bonuses Sumeria does in terms of AoE experience. The way it works for Sumeria right now is if you're within 5 tiles of any unit gaining experience that you're not directly at war with, so you're not fighting against them, you're getting experience as well. Walk by a city-state, you get experience with the city-state killing barbarians. Walk by another player and that player is fighting a war versus yet another player, you're getting experience off that, or if he's fighting a war versus a barbarian. I don't even know what happens. Like, I haven't tested this yet, but I'm very curious to see what happens in a multiplayer game. If I walk a scout by two of my other players in the game who are fighting each other but not at war with me, do I get experience twice every single time that their units attack? I'm not entirely sure how that works yet, but what I have found is in my experience with this so far, this has been a hidden gem. You get promotions non-stop with your scouting units and promotions with your military units just for kind of being in the proximity of other people having combat. I really like it. It's a really cool ability. And is potentially, if it is the full experience gain for 2 other players going to war with each other, is going to be absolutely incredible. So I do want to test that out in the not too distant future on my end. Moving on, epic quests. When you capture a barbarian outpost, receive a tribal village reward in addition to the usual gold. Pay half the usual cost to levy city-state units. The first part of that is decent. Barbarians are a big part of Civilization 6. You're going to be killing a lot of barb encampments throughout the game, and getting extra inspirations and eurekas for free is really, really nice. I mean, the rewards from tribal villages are pretty all over the place. You can get traders, you can get builders, you can get inspirations, you can get eurekas, you can get gold, you can get faith, you can get techs. There's all sorts of crazy things you can get out of them. But in general, as a whole, they're all positive things that you want. You know, maybe some of the really low-end gold rewards, like 40 gold, isn't all that interesting. But in large part, they're pretty damn good. So giving us an extra bonus, even that triggers whenever we clear a barb camp, which is something we're going to be doing throughout the game, is really nice. And that synergizes extremely well with their unique unit, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. So I really like that bonus. I don't think it's super powerful, but I think it's reasonably powerful, and it happens fairly consistently in the games I'm playing, which makes it a nice little addition, nice little just benefit that Sumeria gets when clearing out barb camps, which you're going to have to do anyways. The second part of this, pay half the usual cost to levy city-state units, seems fairly useless to me. Levying city-state units in general feels fairly weak. Outside of the very, very early game, city-states don't seem to do a very good job of keeping their units current. Perhaps this is due to strategic resource limitations. Perhaps it's just due to poor AI. I don't know. But they tend to have a lot of warriors running around, and that seems to be about it. Sometimes they get a couple knights or a couple heavy chariots or something like this. But in general, there's just not a lot of units that are all that useful to have from city-states. So paying half the usual cost to levy a city-state, I guess that's not terrible, but it's not particularly useful either. It requires that the city-state be in a location that's useful to you to levy. It requires you have suzerain status to even do the levying, and it requires a city-state actually build units that you care about. And those things combined, those series of events combining is less likely than you'd find and you might otherwise like, so you're not going to get a whole lot of benefit out of that. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the war cart. The war cart is awesome. It's so good. This is unbelievably good. This is the defining characteristic, in my opinion, about Sumeria, and this is the war cart. What is it? It is a heavy cavalry, and it isn't really. I mean, it's a unique unit. It shares a heavy cavalry promotion. So normally, what you get here, the heavy chariot is the first heavy cavalry style unit that all civilizations have access to, and it's available at the wheel. Sumeria doesn't have to tech the wheel to build this unit. Sumeria gets to build this unit before it has any tech whatsoever. So if I were to settle a city right now, turn 1, and choose production, I could get a war cart. What else does the war cart have? Well, a regular heavy chariot. We can look that up. So then, did it give me combat strength there? I'm not sure it did. Heavy chariot, regularly 28 melee combat strength, movement 2, and if you start a turn on a flat tile with no woods, rainforest, or hills, it gets +1 movement. So normally it's 2 movement, sometimes it's 3 movement, it has 28 combat strength, and it costs 65 production. Let's compare this to the war cart, which is essentially a better heavy chariot all around, all the time. It has the heavy cav promotion line, so it's going to promote in the same way that a heavy chariot does. It has base of 3 movement instead of 2, so it's just straight up faster, and it gets the same bonus of +1 movement if it starts in open terrain. And actually, interestingly, it looks like the wording is slightly different on here, so it may actually apply slightly more often. I found that I was very easy to get that for movement almost all of the time. It has some other great bonuses too. A little bit stronger, 30 instead of 28. A little bit cheaper, 55 instead of 65 on this game speed setting. So it's cheaper, faster, and stronger than a heavy chariot. Okay, that's pretty damn good as itself. Doesn't require tech. That's starting to get really good. And then it doesn't have any upkeep costs. So it doesn't look like the heavy chariot does either. Heavy chariot is an ancient era unit. Ancient era units don't have upkeep costs. That's a lie. That's not true at all, actually. The heavy chariot does have an upkeep cost, and so does the archer, because they're ancient era units. They have 1 upkeep. But your very basic units, the units you're able to build right off the bat, warriors, slingers, scouts, builders, settlers, and in Sumeria's case, the war chariot, which is not war chariot, excuse me, the war cart, which I actually have selected. That's why we can't do it. So if I were to switch over to there and switch it up here, has no upkeep at all. So I don't even begin to know really how to convey how powerful that is as a whole. It's faster, it's cheaper, it arrives sooner on the scene, and it has no upkeep costs. So one of the downsides of spamming a lot of units, especially the very fast horse style units, which are the kind of go-to unit in this game right now, is that you run out of gold to pay their upkeep over a long period of time. So you are forced to figure out some source of gold income to deal with that. War carts are free. You don't ever have to worry about their upkeep costs, which means you can build a bunch of them, you can have a lot sitting around your empire, you can have plenty to deal with barbarians, you can kill a neighbor early and not have to worry about upkeep costs. They're just absolutely amazing. And then there's a couple other benefits about war carts. The war cart promotes into a knight, which is actually really good, because after you go through the classical era here, the first military units you have available to you in the medieval era are the knight and the crossbow, and both of them are quite strong. The fact that you already have a bunch of units that have additional experience because they're Sumeria and have been around for ages gathering experience, and then those promote into knights if you want them to, means you're already getting triple or sometimes quadruple promoted, sometimes double, but around that area, 2, 3, 4 promotions on your war carts that are going to upgrade very easily into knights. Additionally, the strongest units in the game right now are the very fast horse units with high combat strength. You're going to be fighting against a lot of horsemen if you're playing against players. Right now, horsemen are very powerful, and horsemen have a couple restrictions. They're a little bit more expensive. They're 80. They're also 30 combat strength, by the way. Horsemen are 30 combat strength. They're the first classical era, like really nasty unit that comes out. They require 2 horses unless you have an encampment, in which case they require 1 horse to build, and they have a maintenance cost of 2. Compare this to the Sumeria war cart, where they start immediately. Horsemen are 4 movement. They don't have that the open terrain buff for movement, but they're 4 all the time. So the war cart is almost as fast. It is 3 that sometimes is 4 as opposed to pure 4. It's just as strong. It's 30 melee combat strength compared to the 30 melee combat strength. Costs 2 gold less per turn and requires no strategic resources. Costs 55 instead of 80 and can be built immediately. And it still gets the same bonuses. There's a bonus for producing horsemen and a bonus for producing both light and heavy cav units. Right here, the maneuver Civ6 policy that makes production towards these more efficient, gives you a 100% boost. This also applies to the war carts. These units, I don't know how to describe them any more than this. Like, I can't stop hyping this unit. It is probably the strongest unit that I have encountered in the game yet. Just in general, unique units, the earlier they come into play, the more powerful they are, because the more of an effect they're going to have on the defining moments of your game, of setting up your future success through your early game dominance. And nothing is more dominant than the early game war cart. Oh, right. And who could forget? They have one more bonus. Because they don't have enough bonuses already. And that is they have no penalties against anti-cavalry units. So one of the ways you stop masses of horsemen, which is somewhat efficient but not massively efficient, is you use fortified spearmen in very strategic locations to try to limit the amount of area that those horsemen can damage you from, and to counteract those horsemen a little bit. Well, there is no counter unit to the war cart. You just have to suck it up and get run over by war carts. So yeah, one more bonus for that. All right, finally, let's talk about the last part of Sumeria, probably my least favorite part of them. The only one that I don't really think very much of, and this is the Ziggurat. It's an interesting building. It does give science and culture is not terrible. And nor is science. Both of those are okay yields in the game, especially early culture is quite useful. Science seems a little lackluster in the game right now. In general, focusing science seems to be at your detriment. It seems to be better to focus production, in all honesty. But either way, science is not a bad yield. It's a decent yield. The problem with the Ziggurat is it requires that it be placed next to a river if it's going to get the science and culture boost, and it can't be placed on hills at all. And what this means, and unfortunately, though it doesn't say it in the tooltip, it also cannot be placed on bonus resources. So you can't place this on a cattle, you can't place this on a farm, or excuse me, on a wheat, you can't place this on a stone. The tiles that you'd want to put this on. So what it might be useful for is in the tiles that you want to work anyways, those high yield, high food, high production tiles in the early game, things like the tiles I was just describing, cattle, stone, horses, wheat, this type of stuff. Those tiles are the tiles you want to work in the early games. You want that mix of food and production. A way the Ziggurat might be doable, you might actually get some use out of this. Well, if you could put it on one of those tiles that already has the yields you want, but then you wouldn't get the bonus yield. So instead of getting 2 food, 2 production out of stone, if you could put a Ziggurat on that stone, you get 2 food, 1 production, 2 science, and if that was on a river, 1 culture as well. And that would become a really good early game tile, a very nice addition to what your capital or whatever your city it is going to work. The problem is you can't replace bonus resources, so you can't do that. So the only tiles this could really be put on are flat grassland, flat plains, flat tundra, flat desert. And those tiles are bad. You don't want to work those. You don't really want a 2 food, 2 science, 1 culture only tile. That doesn't give you enough food or production to really justify working that tile. You certainly don't want a 1 food, 1 production, 2 science, 1 culture tile. And even worse, you don't really want to use up your river tiles. River tiles are pretty high priority. There's a number of wonders that require that. A couple of districts with bonuses for being on the river, things like the aqueduct, things like the commercial hub. And because districts have adjacency bonuses for other districts, you tend to end up having your city settled on the river for the housing bonus, your districts around the city very close on that river for their specific bonuses, and then districts very close to those districts for the adjacency bonuses, which means there isn't really room for a lot of ziggurats to be built in there. All of this still might be okay. You might think, well, you know, I'm probably not going to use these tiles very often, but I'll put down a couple of them just in case I need an extra little bit of science 1 turn or a little bit of culture at some point. But the problem remains that builders have a finite number of charges, and it really tends not to be worth actually building this building. So this is probably the only disappointing part of Sumeria for me. I wish this building either didn't have that hill restriction. I think these would be very solid on grassland hills. Grassland hills are 2 food, 1 hammer. And if you put these on top of that, it'd be 2 food, 1 hammer, 2 science, 1 culture in the early game. And that would be really awesome. But that's the same thing. This is essentially asking that it be put on bonus resource. If I could build this on wheat or stone, it'd be really good too. But in general, I just don't think this building is worth constructing. This improvement, excuse me, is worth constructing very often. All right, so hopefully this was helpful. This is going to be the first of a series of these. I'm going to do all of the civs in Civilization 6, talk about their bonuses. I want to give you a little bit of sense of how this all fits together, maybe to like round up the review of the civ. Basically, Sumeria is very strong in the early game. They're capable of being extremely aggressive at very low cost for them because of policies such as maneuver, where you get 100% production towards their unique unit, the quickness, the speed at which the unit is available, and there's extreme bonuses both in upkeep as well as just combat and movement that these units have. They are terrifying to have as your neighbors. A good player playing Sumeria is going to roll over his opponents unless there is some very unfavorable terrain or a huge amount of effort made to defend themselves. And because they have that early fast responding, extremely mobile, aggressive unit that synergizes so well with their ability to clear barb camps and so well with their ability to kill players, they're getting a lot of boosts. They're getting boosts from the extra barb camps. They're getting boosts from potentially scaring their neighbors into having to build military instead of infrastructure. They're able to often capture cities very efficiently and very cheaply in the early game. You can slam war carts into cities and take cities in the early game, no problem. So they can clear out city-states if they want to capture just land without having to build settlers. All around, very scary early game, and it transitions quite nicely into a mid game because there's no problems with upkeep or anything else. So you still have those military units hanging around. Those military units are going to keep you safe even into the mid game, and you still don't have to pay anything for them. And once you do hit the mid game, start seeing things like being able to upgrade them to knights, then you are good to go with already promoted units, as well as getting your scouts and the rest of your units just extra experience. Awesome civ, one of the best civs in the game right now, if not the best civ in the game. If you haven't played it already, I strongly recommend checking it out if you can find a lobby where it's not banned, because it's just that damn good. Anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this. As I said, first of many. I'll be talking about all the civs sooner or later. And let me know what you think. If you enjoyed it, hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button. Come check me out on YouTube. Come check me out on Twitch. I live stream a lot, and I hope I will see you guys around.